Chapter 2. Who the heck am I? My wife and I were married in 1993. It seems like forever ago. I mean, yesterday. We began our truck driving career in July of 1997. She was my co-driver in a team operation for 9 of those years, so I've driven as a team and I've also driven as a solo driver. I've worked for 6 different carriers, all of them fairly large, which is what I recommend to the new driver. I'll explain why throughout the book. Together, we have over 3 million miles under our butts. I have a male's perspective on the job, and my wife, Lorinda, has her own unique views, as wives tend to do. On that subject, I once read that all the planets spin counterclockwise except for Venus, which is associated with women. So what's that tell you? A match made in heaven. At least I think that's the right location. As you're about to discover, our relationship involves a healthy dose of sarcastic humor that borders on irreverence. If we both couldn't take a joke and some verbal abuse, we would have divorced years ago. You can't stay married as long as we have while living in a space the size of a walk-in closet without a rock-solid sense of humor. If you don't have one, you probably ought to order one from one of those late-night infomercials before you pursue a career in truck driving. But that's not all. Buy a sense of humor now and we'll include a set of earplugs specifically designed to tune out your spouse. Man, I'm a sucker for those infomercials. So how twisted is our marriage? Well, we're not nearly as dysfunctional as Ozzy and Sharon Osbourne, but we're certainly no Ozzy and Harriet either. You won't hear many pet names like Honey Bunch or Snookums being thrown around our house. Although I have many names for Lorinda, her official moniker is the Evil Overlord, which she knows and willingly accepts. She will henceforth be known as such. Since her official pet name can be a mouthful, I usually just shout loving words at her. It might sound something like this. Hey, you old hag, where's my golf shoes? Her pet name for me? Dumbass, as in, they're by your golf clubs where you left them, dumbass. Now, I don't know how fitting that name is, but I seem to answer to it every single time. And lo and behold, my golf shoes were right where she said they'd be. So maybe there's something to that name after all. A tad bit of advice to you newlyweds out there. You probably shouldn't give your new spouse pet names like this immediately. Not if you value your special parts anyway. How we got into trucking. I started considering a career in trucking because I wanted to go to college. Say what? Let me explain so you don't think I've been hitting the crack pipe. In the early 90s, I was working at a dead-end factory job by day. By night, I was the lead singer of a decent local cover band, and my life's ambition was to be a rock star. Hey, that's practical, right? You can check me out doing some Led Zeppelin if you're a glutton for punishment. Watch out, though. It's chock full of explicit language. Since then, I've come back to my faith and dropped my potty mouth. So that GD I drop at the beginning is especially hard for me to hear. I'm glad my God's a forgiving one. I did rock this song, though. You can find a link to that video in the body of the text version, or there'll be an appendix in the back with all the links in this book. The Evil Overlord listened to Nancy Reagan and just said no to my rock and roll dreams. That's understandable, I suppose. Although I really can't imagine why she wouldn't want me to turn into a druggie and be surrounded by fake blonde groupies with equally fake body parts. It's a mystery to me. Women can be so unreasonable sometimes, can't they? Instead, I decided to go to school in Dallas. In 1995, I graduated from a 2-year technical college from which I earned an associate's degree in music and video business. I was either going to become a band manager or get into the technical side of broadcasting. As a band manager, I would have likely still been around all those drugs and groupies on a regular basis, so broadcasting it was. Instead of becoming the next Axl Rose, or as manager, I got an entry-level part-time job as a cameraman at a local TV station. Because I had an education, I quickly moved up to directing the weekend newscast. It was still only part-time, and although it sounds glamorous and I liked the work, the pay absolutely sucked. Once I figured out that there wasn't much money in local broadcasting, I began taking classes at a community college with hopes of transferring to Kansas State University to study architecture. If I couldn't become the next lead singer for Alice in Chains, I figured I'd become the next Frank Lloyd Wright. Since part-time at the TV station wasn't paying the bills, I also had a full-time job at an egg packing plant where I worked on the dock as a shipping receiving clerk. On these docks, I met, you guessed it, truckers. We attended an open house at KSU, and I spoke with the professors, who quickly squashed my plan of working a full-time job while attending classes. The course workload was way too intense, and most students who had tried it had eventually dropped out. It seems that it takes a good bit of time to build a model skyscraper out of toothpicks. Who knew? The problem was that we knew we couldn't pay our bills unless the evil overlord and I both worked full-time jobs. Well, now we're in a pickle, aren't we? Time for plan B. Back on the docks, I had always heard the truckers talking about their pay and how many miles they were getting. It was a lot more money than I was making, so I began to ask them questions as I loaded their trucks. Getting a trucker to talk is not exactly hard, as you can no doubt tell by my rambling so far. Every trucker that heard I was thinking about teaming with my wife as a co-driver gave me a stiff warning. If you don't get a divorce after 6 months in a truck with your wife, your marriage will last forever. Despite their warnings, I was convinced that if I could persuade the evil overlord to drive a truck with me for a year or two, we could pay off all our debt and afterward attend KSU completely debt-free. Now, how would I talk a fairy princess into learning to drive a truck? What finally swung her was the evening a friendly trucker agreed to let me see the interior of his new truck. It was impressive. It was really clean inside and out. He had a TV and a microwave oven inside a set of cabinets, and it even had bunk beds. It reminded me of an RV. The evil overlord worked in the same plant, so I ran in and got her to come take a look. She, too, was impressed, and as we walked away, she said, "That was nice. I could live like that for a year or two." It had worked. On second thought, maybe it was the prospect of escape from me through divorce within 6 months that did it. Now that I think of it, it was probably the latter. Sorry, woman, you're stuck with me now. And that was the birth of two truckers. Well, now, that's all fine and dandy. How do I know I can trust what you're saying? Good question. I think I'll answer that right now.